BYU fans are not alone. Miami's gripe with the committee is very real.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth, right here at the number one sports podcast network out there. How Oklahoma avoids a letdown game at home against Missouri. Breakdowns of the games that have G5 playoff implications, all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. Yesterday, Alex Dono of Locked On Canes, who is here to join me for this first segment, I talked about BYU because I think that their frustrations with the committee are 100% legitimate. Miami's are arguably even greater. They have the same record as Notre Dame, who plays mostly the ACC. They beat Notre Dame earlier this year, and they're 4 spots behind the Hurricanes. I heard Joel Klatt say, and I think he put it very well, the committee, first of all, and he didn't say this part, the committee wants nothing more than for Virginia Tech to knock off Miami or for Pitt to beat Miami next week. That would be the committee's dream scenario to simplify this, but they're just going to keep those two separate so that they cannot have to make the decision to put Notre Dame in over Miami. That's how it reads to me, Dono.
Well, and also the committee has structured their system in a way that it rigs their own system in order to keep them from having to have these tough conversations and comparisons, right? Now, listen, as a guy who covers Miami, I fully admit Miami went through a tough stretch late October, early November, right? Like Miami is in this situation because they lost to a less talented but less talented Louisville team, and they lost to a less talented SMU team. So those are the two losses that put Miami in this conversation. But what you talk about having the same record and the head-to-head win against Notre Dame. So what the committee has done to separate themselves from even having to have this conversation is the way that they do their debates when they get into that room and they start, ranking teams and doing the comparisons, they group teams into clusters of either 3 or 4, the comparative pools, they call it. Now, what the committee members have said the last couple weeks, and we've even had a revolving door of committee chairmen, which is kind of laughable, but what they're saying is the head-to-head between Miami and Notre Dame hasn't even come up in their conversations because they haven't been in the same comparative pool. They are separated by too many different spots, which gets very interesting because, again, you've got a buffer of, 3 teams between Notre Dame and Miami now. And, you can certainly have your discussions about, a team like Utah that has 2 losses, but they're ranked ahead of Miami to add that extra buffer between Notre Dame and Miami. But it's like the committee takes any sort of responsibility away from it to say, well, we can't rate the head-to-head because they're not in a comparative pool. Well, who makes the comparative pools? You make them. And so you have now taken logic away from this debate, which is wild. But let me put the final, I guess the hopeful spin on it from a Miami point of view. The committee has also shown that, there is some recency bias, and they do go a little bit based on vibes by the way that they rank these things. Obviously, I mentioned Miami had a very tough middle stretch of the season. They lost 2 out of 3 games at that point.
Eye test.
The eye test.
This is an eye test committee, Dono.
Yeah, it is an eye test committee. So, you would say Miami has the opportunity if Miami, their final 2 games are against Virginia Tech on the road, which, on paper seems very winnable, and Pittsburgh on the road, which could be a very, very tricky game. But if Miami wins both of those games in impressive fashion and closes out the season with 4 consecutive wins, the eye test would look a lot better than it did at the middle part of the season. And then maybe Miami can get themselves into that same comparative pool with Notre Dame where the head-to-head would actually matter. So that would be the hopeful spin, because the committee has shown you, based on the eye test, Spencer, that Miami the past 2 weeks with impressive performances, the committee has been willing to leapfrog Miami over Georgia Tech 2 weeks ago, and then over Vanderbilt this past week, despite those teams not picking up new losses. So the committee has shown that you're not necessarily locked into your spot, even if the teams in front of you don't lose. So I guess that would be the hopeful point of view for Miami if they can keep moving up, even if enough teams in front of them don't lose games.
Yeah, I have, going back to the offseason coming into this year, I have largely defended what the committee has done because I felt that in the final rankings for the teams that actually make the playoff, they've continuously got it right. I think they are on the precipice of their most precarious, dangerous, and impactful 12-team playoff selection or any playoff selection year in recent memory, maybe going back to the Florida State when they were 13-0 but had lost Jordan Travis for the year. Now, sometimes these things work themselves out, and we saw 10-2 teams, including Miami and BYU, who are right there again on the outside looking in of the college football playoff. And man, I would just hate the ramifications from a viewership standpoint, as in how fans view the sport and how it is consumed. And I would hate it from an incentive standpoint if Miami winds up 10-2, Notre Dame gets into the playoff, and Miami does not. Man, I think there is a big can of worms there that could go south for the college football play, just for college football in general going forward. I don't like what that would mean.
Yeah, and it's there have been a lot of arguments that have been happening, not just with me, but all sorts of people, national college football analysts with Miami and Notre Dame fans, like debating this stuff. Yeah, I get some, and probably some of them are earned. I get a lot of comments on social media from Notre Dame fans, but something I would like to emphasize is, at the end of the day, I think I would like to see a scenario where both teams get in. Like, I'm not saying Notre Dame doesn't look like a playoff team. They do. I'm saying that there is a chance here that both of these teams go 10-2. Notre Dame earns their way in, and so does Miami in my eyes. So the part that I tend to harp on is the idea of Miami getting left out despite the head-to-head win to Notre Dame. I don't think I've ever said it that I don't think Notre Dame should be a playoff team. I think, assuming they finish the season the way that they've played for these 8 straight wins that they've had, I think they should be in. I think Miami should be in as well. I think
no, we disagree. I don't want to see Notre Dame in the playoff at 10-2.
Really?
No, I do not. I want those results early in the season to matter, because then you look at their schedule. Yeah. USC is a good win, but one good win should get you in at 11-1. Like, this conversation's being had with Oregon. If Oregon doesn't beat USC and they beat Washington and get left out of the playoff, I'm an Oregon guy. I'm not going to object to that. I'm really not. I think there will be a legitimate case of, you have some good win, but is one good win at 10-2 enough? No, you need to have several really good wins.
Okay, you know what? Your mouth to God's ears. I think I like your explanation on that. I do.
So anyway, let's briefly get to this Virginia Tech game, because, I mean, Miami, if I go back in my archives of memory data banks, like Zola in The Winter Soldier, and I just put it onto a bunch of electronic computers as opposed to the other type. Anyway, I'm recording the show too early in the day. My brain's mush, but you get what I'm going for here. If I go back into my memory bank, Dono, I don't think Mario Cristobal has ever lost a game to an unranked team when he's a double-digit favorite. I think he's perfect in those spots. I don't think there's ever been a reason to worry whatsoever. He's about to play 2 unranked teams where he's a double-digit favorite in all likelihood. We'll see how much he's favored by against Pitt. But let's just go with this Virginia Tech game. There should not be any problem here, right?
Shouldn't be. And if Miami does lose this game, you should not hear a peep out of me or anyone backing Miami to get into the CF. Like, that debate is over if they lose to Virginia Tech. If this game were being played 3 weeks ago, during a time when Miami was really struggling to find an offensive identity, I would be a lot more worried about it. Miami looked a lot more vulnerable in mid to late October because the offense wasn't getting first downs. Carson Beck was, really struggling for about a 3 to 4 week stretch of the season. They've been clicking for the last couple of weeks, which has always been the key for Miami. The defense, which is the total opposite of last year, by the way. Last year it was the offense carrying the defense. This year Miami's defense has been playing at a CFP level all season long. It's the offense that's been inconsistent. The defense has been very good. But the offense seems to have found something with a new running back starter, Gerard Pringle, the true freshman, who's been a lot more dynamic and a lot more elusive and has more breakaway speed. And Miami is finding more and more ways to use freshman sensation Malachi Toney every week, and it's really opened up the offense. So, like, based on current form, famous last words, it is hard to imagine Miami losing this game as a double-digit favorite. It would require probably a lot of self-inflicted wounds. But, listen, Miami versus Virginia Tech goes back a very long way. It's an old rivalry. The game is in Blacksburg. And, of course, Virginia Tech, they've hired James Franklin, who will not be coaching this week, but he will be in attendance at the game.
That'd be cool.
So wouldn't that be funny?
Imagine is there anything legally stopping that from happening?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I'll throw him out there. See what he does.
Let's throw it out there.
You want to endear yourself to the fan base immediately at Virginia Tech? Get on the sideline and beat Miami as a 3-17, as a 17.5-point home dog.
Yeah,
that's what James Franklin would need to do. That'd be the most epic entrance as a head coach in the history of college football. Alex Dono, Locked On Canes, great as always. Here's how Oklahoma avoids a letdown against Missouri, which they must avoid. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Tomorrow, right here, on this program, as always, I will have my best bets for the week, which took a major stumble. Huge hit, regression, step back, and we're trying to climb back over 500. If you believe I can do that, you can ride the picks, which will be based on lines, of course, provided by our friends at FanDuel. If you think I'm staying cold and I stink, like Pat McAfee describes kids that miss field goals sometimes on College game day, then guess what? You can fade the picks over at FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. It's a classic trap game for Oklahoma. There's no serious look ahead. They have LSU next week, which once upon a time looked like it might be a tough game. But the reason I say there's a trap game element to this is twofold. Number one, they just went on the road again and got a big-time emotional win. Oklahoma should play with plenty of confidence. And I don't think Brent Venables has to motivate his group. I think this is just kind of the natural part of the psychology of college football players. When you go on the road and play a physical, draining, both physically and emotionally game, and you win, or you lose, frankly, against Alabama, there can be a little bit of a letdown. So Missouri comes to town this week trying to play spoiler. They're back into the top 25, not mine, but the playoff committee has them there. And as I said earlier this week, 19 to 25, actually. I don't really care what you do. Full Stephen A. Smith. I'm going to tell you right now, we don't care. Because at that point, the resumes are just so in and out and all. Anyway, so is Missouri a good team? Yes. Here's what makes this game another element that makes this a bit of a trap game for Oklahoma here. They kind of play this style anyway, but Missouri's defense is a lot better than you think. That unit can absolutely hold the Sooners under 20 points. Now, if they go over 20 points, Matt Zollers is not getting above that particular number. He is not. I don't think that Missouri's offense is going to be able to do that. They'd need Bo Pribula to play. This Missouri rushing attack is lethal. Absolutely lethal. They have had 200 or more rushing yards in a game, not just in two straight, but 7 times this year. They torched Mississippi State last week for 326. Rumor has it, this has been floating around Columbia. I have this well documented. Rumor has it, Ahmad Hardy is still running. That is an unconfirmed report, but I am really confident that it is actually true. Insert Oklahoma that has one of the best rushing defenses in all of college football. They have not allowed a team to run for 200 yards this year. Do you know the most yards on the ground that Oklahoma has conceded, and who got it? Michigan. Michigan, all the way back on September 6th, went for 146th. Oklahoma, I mentioned the 7 times at 200 yards or more. How about this for a counter stat on defense? Oklahoma has on 6 occasions this year held opponents under 100 rushing yards. That side of the ball for Brent Venables and the Sooners is playing incredibly well. It won them the game at Alabama last week, which was at pretty close to full strength. And Missouri, of course, with its third-string quarterback, is not. And so I have got so many red flags going up. Oh my God, this is a letdown spot. This could, and it could. I do not have a high level of confidence that Missouri is going to win this football game. Possible, yes. There would be a lot of things that would surprise me more than Missouri beating Oklahoma on Saturday. I do not think that's going to happen because I do not have any faith that Brent Venables is just going to let a third-string quarterback who's a true freshman do anything. What is the best? Think about this. What's the best offensive outcome for Missouri? It probably involves a John Mateer turnover or 2 that lead to 10 Missouri points because of the short field. That's what probably has to happen. Missouri's a good team. Not a great one, but a good one. When they have Bo Pribula, they're a good team. When they don't have him, they're all right. They're not bad. They are all right. But I'm not alone in feeling this way. John Miller of Locked On Mizzou feels this way about the game.
What's up, Locked On College Football? It's John Miller with Locked On Mizzou. And for this Oklahoma game this week, I think there's a real case to be made that Missouri, with its defense, Oklahoma's defense, this is going to be a knockout, drag them out kind of affair that Missouri can win. But I have to admit, with Missouri still on its true freshman third-string quarterback, Matt Zollers, I just don't have enough confidence that the Tigers are going to be able to score enough points to win this game. But certainly if Missouri can win the turnover battle, if they can steal some possessions, maybe making some fourth downs offensively, obviously Ahmad Hardy can be a big difference maker, but still, if I'm going to be honest with you, I just think Oklahoma is probably the safer pick here.
I am with John. I'll take the Sooners, but I don't think there are a lot of points scored. I really don't. You're going to watch that Missouri defense if you tune into this game and go, man, they're pretty good. Boy, if they kept Pribula healthy, they might have had something. Yeah, you're 100% right about that. I'll take Oklahoma to win. Low scoring, very low score, 20-15. Weird game. Oklahoma wins, Missouri covers. Let's go to another one that has got some playoff implications. Not the game you would think, but can I interest you? And I'm going to. In TCU, playing on the road at Houston this week, in-state matchup in the good old Lone Star State, the great state of Texas. Do you realize that Houston still has a path to the Big 12 championship and therefore the college football playoff? It's not that crazy. They just need BYU to lose, who's only a 2.5-point favorite at Cincinnati. I'll talk about them and that game on Friday's show. But don't take my word for it about the opportunity that is here for Houston. Take the word of my guy Parker Ainsworth of Locked On Cougs.
With the season wrapping up in just a couple weeks, Houston's got a chance to do something special in Willie Fritz's second year. 10-2 would be an incredible look for year 2 under the new ball coach, and Houston go 2-0 with 2 in-state opponents, both TCU and Baylor, to do just that. I think Houston will take advantage of a turnover-prone Josh Hoover. He's thrown 10 picks on the year. Houston's got a veteran secondary that's played very well thus far. I imagine they'll do more of the same in that one. There may be some gamble plays and be beat over the top once or twice. The deal is I think they win more of those than they lose. I also think you saw Eddie Walls have a lot of pressure in Arizona State, a team that was also one-dimensional on offense. I imagine more of the same in this one out of him on their own offense. Houston, I think, will have a decent day running the ball. It'll be death by 1,000 cuts and slowly whittle away at a TCU run defense that is losing reasons to keep playing football games. Sonny Dykes may be out after this one, and that, I think, will be the conversation. As Houston, I'm predicting to win 24-17 this Saturday at TD ECU. Just the third PM on a Saturday game Houston's been given this year. Let's go show out in TDC and make it a big one.
So Houston's home field advantage this year hasn't been that great. West Virginia, who's rebuilding, went in there and dropped 45. Josh Hoover hasn't had a moment this year. He's had some good games, but he hasn't had a moment. I think this is Josh Hoover's moment. I think this is, for whatever that is. And TCU has definitely underachieved a bit. They're having a fine season. They're going to a bowl game. But the guy who I had as the best quarterback in the Big 12 entering this year, I do not trust that Houston defense. I think they need to upgrade their personnel on that side of the ball before they can really take that next step as a program. FanDuel has Houston favored by just 1.5 on their home field. The over-under sitting there at 54.5. I think a lower scoring game favors Houston. I like the run game. But Josh Hoover, he's got to protect the football, as Parker pointed out. But if he is able to do that, give me the TCU Horned Frogs to play just a little spoiler. It's an outside shot to the Big 12 championship, but it's not zero for Houston right now. Give me TCU to play spoiler in the Chaos Conference of college football, which can apply to the ACC as well. I will take the Horned Frogs 38-35. A bunch of points go up and down the field in what feels like a classic Big 12 matchup. The other games that have playoff implications this week, they're not in the SEC because it's Cupcake Week, but it's the last one ever. Thank goodness. Does Tulane get it done? What does that mean for James Madison? The group of 5 playoff games, or playoff implicated games rather, coming up next. Before I get to the biggest G5 games of the weekend, I just want to make a quick note. If this were the offseason, I'd pay a lot more attention and discuss a lot more about this report, rumor, whatever you call it, that Michigan could want to leave the Big Ten if private equity gets infused and all that. I'm telling you right now, I saw the story, recognized how big it is, and in my head went, I don't want to talk about that on the show. And I control what gets said on here. It's worth mentioning because it could be a rather significant report, but during the season, the thing that matters most is the actual season. So let's talk about games with playoff implications. Tulane is the favorite to make the group of 5 playoff spot. They control their own destiny because of the tiebreakers in the American. I don't think anybody would be able to catch them. I will talk about James Madison in just a moment. Tulane has to survive their next 2 games to make the American Championship game and have a chance to play themselves into the college football playoff. Do I think that is I'm not having that conversation today. Nope, that's an off-season sort of topic. So, Tulane plays Temple this week. That is the first time I have ever mentioned Temple on this show, except to point out they're one of 2 FBS teams with the Owls, 3, that have owls as their mascots. You've got FAU, you have got Temple, and you have got Kennesaw State. They are all the Owls. So Tulane goes to play the one-time coaching destination of Matt Rule. They're a 7.5-point favorite according to our friends at FanDuel. Now, on paper, Tulane should be able to win this game no problem. What if I threw at you this notion? And it's not a notion, it's just a reality that you probably weren't aware of. What if I told you, and I am, that Temple is at home off of a bye? Does that sound even scarier? Does it sound in late November like a game that could cause an earthquake in college football? It could. It could, and the team I'll talk about next, James Madison, would be a significant beneficiary because they could pick up their best win of the year. But Tulane doesn't need to bolster their resume anymore. They just have to avoid losing. If they do that, and we'll see how there's another crossover between these 2 teams. What's the mental focus of these head coaches? I think we're going to find out this week. John Sumrall, as I talked about on Locked On Auburn recently, is tied to the Auburn job. He could be the lead candidate for the Auburn job. Bob Chesney might be tied to the UCLA job. Maybe he's going over there. Sometimes when coaches get distracted, details fall through the cracks. And Temple's fighting for bowl eligibility. They've got plenty to play for. Temple's actually a chaos team, as crazy it is as it sounds to say, in the college football playoff picture. Why? Because they play Tulane this week, and then, wait for it, they play North Texas, who's also in the running for the American Championship game and college football playoff. So, talking about this particular game, Tulane's pass defense isn't very good. Now, the problem is that Evan Simon, the quarterback for Temple, has thrown for over 250 yards in just 2 games this year. The last time that he did it was against Tulsa. Now, you may remember Tulsa from the team that beat Oklahoma State. They're the first team to win in Stillwater from that program since, I think, 1951 was the year, but they're not very good. So this hasn't been a prolific Temple passing attack against a Tulane pass defense that has been really bad. Trinidad Chambliss burned them for over 300 yards. Well, Spencer, you can't fault them that much. It's Ole Miss. They're a top 5 team. Okay, fine. Let me just go to their last 3 games, which are against American opponents, American Conference opponents, that is, because I think every college football team for now is based in the United States, but I hope that never changes because the international stuff, I'm not a fan. Not a fan. Like Michigan was going to play, I think it was Central Michigan over in Germany. Then they said, oh, wait, we're like 100 miles apart. Why don't we just play, maybe even closer than that? Why don't we play in the United States? And they're going to do that. So the Owls are in a position to go against this Tulane defense. And if Evan Simon has a career day, the best of the season, then Temple could make this more than just a little bit interesting. If he can't, I don't know how well the Owls are going to run on the Tulane defense. They allow 195 rushing yards a game, but Tulane doesn't do that a whole heck of a lot. But the Green Wave can be exploited through the air. They have allowed over 350 yards in 3 consecutive games. The Green Wave have just not had it on the back end. They need help in the secondary. But guess what? You don't have a trade deadline like you have in the NFL. Reinforcements are not going to arrive. You've got to make do with what you've got right now. So, the pick that I'm making in this game is indeed Tulane to go on the road and win. I don't think that Temple's got enough offensive juice and firepower to go toe-to-toe with the Green Wave, who have been, in recent years, a tough, hard-nosed, defensively driven team. That's not what they are this season. They've had a little bit more kind of a Big 12 feel, and they've got former Big 12 quarterback Jake Retzloff at the helm, of course. So I'm taking Tulane to win. I'm not taking them to cover, though. I think they have to sweat this one out a bit. They have had their troubles on the road. Go back to the UTSA game, who's an average team in the American, much like Temple, and they lost that game by 22. How? Turnovers. They had 4 of them in the game, 3 interceptions and a fumble. So I'll take Tulane to win. I think this gets decently high scoring. I'll go 31-27. Tulane gets it done, remains the G5 playoff favorite and in that picture. Now, if they were to lose, that would be a big boon for James Madison, who plays one of their best opponents of the year this weekend at home. Game day, I think, thought about going to James Madison. I'm glad they didn't. They should have gone to Montana State, but different conversation. How focused are the Dukes? They're 13.5-point home favorites against Washington State, but Bob Chesney, according to Rick Neuheisel, is one of the top candidates for the UCLA job. Do details slip through the cracks? Does that rumor get back to the locker room? Does that affect how driven they are to go out and win? Because they're in the mix for the playoff spot. I don't think they should be, but if they beat Washington State, who's not a Power 4 team at this point in time, unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way. That's the reality, though. Washington State has had some moments where they've gone on the road. They have been a huge underdog, and they have played a couple of games tight. They had Virginia on the ropes in Charlottesville. They had Ole Miss playing in a dogfight in the 4th quarter in Oxford. Well, this game is being played at James Madison, and Washington State has run the ball okay in the last few weeks, and they're coming off of a convincing win over Louisiana Tech. Washington State has run for 125 or more in 6 straight. James Madison's defense has been completely suffocating in the Sun Belt this year against the run. 89.7 yards per game allowed. So does Washington State find an advantage there? I suspect not. Zevi Eckhouse, the quarterback for Washington State, has thrown for under 200 yards in 4 consecutive matchups. This defense for JMU has been playing at a high level. The offense has been doing more than enough. They've been beating everybody by 2 scores or more, usually. They won last week 58-10. Zevi Eckhouse is going to have to go in there. I think Washington State has to win the special teams battle if they're going to pull an upset. I think Eckhouse has to have a career day throwing the football. Virginia hosted Washington State a while back. They were a 17.5-point home favorite. and ran for 142 yards against this Washington State team. James Madison runs over everybody this year. 241 per game as a team on the ground. They have been prolific running the football. I don't think Washington State is built up front to go toe-to-toe with James Madison in this game. It will be a good win for the Dukes. It will not be the sort of win that legitimizes their record to put them ahead of Tulane, but you win, you stay in the fold, and you hope chaos ensues, and you become a big fan of the Temple Owls. So I'll take James Madison to win this one. I think they will cover as well. 31-13. I think they roll the Cougs. I apologize to my guy Alex Brink, the radio analyst for Washington State, but I think James Madison puts it on them this week. That is how we wrap today's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.